edition of New Millennium Oral History Archives in the city of New York, and in the globe, I should say, the rest of the world as well. And it's Tuesday, 20 April 2021. I'm here with Linda Fletcher, who is, I will say, put it under the rubric of a writer and an internationalist. She's done work, just the volume, raise my voice a bit. She's done work in Ghana and Belize and here in the States and California and Bay Area, where she went to school, college, and she's sort of been migrating back and forth between the West Coast and the East Coast, so probably somewhat fair to say.
Until I stop going.
I'm going to turn it over to you. So
and at some point, I stopped going back and forth.
You're going to put it down here so that
okay, and as far as community organizing goes, my mother did community organizing. My mother worked in the labor movement. And I went to Berkeley High School, and I grew up in a very political environment. And we used to see Jerry Rubin and all of them. I grew up, my best friend's brother married Huey Newton's brother. So we knew Huey Newton.
Yeah.
So I knew the Panthers, some of the people in the Panthers in the early days.
Were you either in the Panthers or fellow travelers?
I never really joined organizations, but I supported organizations. So I would attend all the rallies, all the demonstrations, and then when I went to college, you know, we were always doing something. We were always organizing something, always doing something.
Around the environment.
Yeah. So we were like, we challenged the school. It was back in those days, people were challenging the school system on relevant education. And one of the problems we had with the system at that time is all this was going on in the outside world, and in the classroom they didn't want to talk to them. So we constantly had these challenges and these battles with the system. But we at the same time we had like college professors that were like our best friends. But they were like under the radar, and the students were up front. And we were notorious, I'm telling you.
So when you're talking about your undergraduate years at the State University,
Right.
You're talking about late 60s, early 70s, mid 70s, late 70s?
That was the early 70s.
Early 70s, okay.
And what we did was, you know, we'd all meet, you know, it was a great environment to study in. We used to call them the country club colleges.
You all have all that space out there in California.
And we call it the country club colleges. That's what they were like. And I remember once we were all sitting around and, you know, talking like students, and we actually a friend ran for mayor of a little small town of Kentucky.
Did he or she win?
He would. And we mobilized all the students. We were all in the background, because most of the people were white and we were black. So there was enough white people in front of us until we weren't singled out. But he actually became the mayor. And that town was Bazooka. But then that was kind of funny, and the students saw that they could do it because the student population was growing in that environment. So that was pretty wild, and we had demonstrations, we had protests on campus.
Talk about your family, their activism, and their...
Oh, my family activism. I have documented my family history. I knew some of it growing up, but a lot of it I was able to put pieces together. I've even done my genealogy. And the community I grew up in was the first African-American suburb that was developed after World War II in the whole state of California.
And specifically, where was that community?
It was in Richmond, California.
Richmond, California. That would be Northern California.
Northern California, right. We lived there for a while.
What are some of the areas bounded?
San Pablo.
Buddy.
Then we moved to Berkeley. We had Berkeley, we had Albany, we had El Cerrito. So that's where we were. It was right on the water, right on the bay. So that's where I grew up. And it was a very And when I did research,
Your family originally come from the South. There was a thinks about the Black migration being mostly from the South to the North.
Oh, yes,
Is that
yes.
Other people stopped off in the Midwest and Detroit. Of course, 100,000 people there in Chicago. There was also another migration from the South to the West Coast.
My parents were part of that migration.
From the South to the West
They were from Louisiana.
Right.
And now the community that I lived in, I know my mother told me this part of the history, that the ministers had to all come together and demand that a community be built for Black people. So the very community that I lived in was political. Every street was named after a minister in the whole community.
Was your family churched or unchurched?
My father was. Well, actually, my mother's family from Louisiana are actually Methodists. And if you know anything about Methodists people are very political, period.
Very good people. If you take the tradition of Methodism and the temperance society, keeping people off psychotropic alcohol years and years ago, Methodism has a really good success.
So in the South, they were colored Methodists.
And now that's apart from of course, African Methodist.
Right. This is a Black Southern Methodist. And most of my mother's family were all schooled by the Methodists. But if you're schooled by the Methodists in the South, it's your responsibility, the responsibility to your community.
Right.
And whatever issues of the day, you're supposed to be involved in. Like you see, you've been to the church center at the UN, right?
Which one?
The church center at the UN.
Yeah.
That's run by the Methodist women.
It's a chapel inside.
The Methodist women started that because they wanted to raise money the way they wanted to have their own decision making. And if you talk to some of those people there, they will, they have a sense of pride because they know that their ancestors fought for slavery. So that's in there.
In this country, the two faiths, there are others, really, the European-derived faiths, that really have the biggest, the Quakers and the Methodists.
Exactly. So, and I think, personally, we're all supposed to deal with whatever the issues are of our day. If that makes you a radical, not really radical, that's just citizenship.
It's engaged, being engaged.
Yeah. And my mother was engaged all the way through her life, even up to 90 years old. And she was part of the PTA, and she was working to get better education.
How many siblings?
4.
Four siblings.
So she eventually became the president of the PTA to make sure that the Black students, her own kids and the community that we lived in, get the right education.
And would you say, is your family primarily based here?
Yeah. No, my family stayed based in California.
In California.
My mother lived in Washington, D.C. for a while.
Just a footnote to those in the viewership. Normally we do these interviews al fresco, outdoors, as it were. And we normally do it in front of the Mahatma Gandhi sculpture garden. And right now there's a beautiful cherry blossom tree that's overhanging the sculpture. But there are a lot of activities across the street where Barnes & Noble, third floor lounge, a lot of activities right now. Complimentary cannabis is being given out, and the queue is the line is from here to eternity. And we can't do it because of the sound, so we're up here, thankfully, and we're doing it here. So, sorry.
So, my mother worked for Dorothy Heights when she moved to California.
Great Dorothy Heights.
Yeah, she retired and she moved to Washington, D.C. for a while. She worked for Dorothy Heights. So my mother was always with some political
Was your mother at the
I don't think so. But she was at one of the first conferences they had in Texas or somewhere for women.
So she was a member of Mrs. Heights'
organization.
Right. That was the National Organization of Negro Women, which is still
exactly.
It still exists.
Right.
Correct?
Right.
That's one of the oldest organizations
exactly.
in the African American community.
Exactly. And one of the things my mother would always do when I was busy, but I would see her at the end of the year, she would sit and write checks to organizations, $25 each. And that's how these women are trained. And that's something you did every year.
Wow.
You just sat and I remember once you told me it all adds up. So maybe we need to have a campaign where every year you pick 4 groups or organizations that you give $25 to. She did it every year.
Yeah, all that stuff, you and I talk about this all the time. All those things can be done. There's no reason why.
Yeah, a lot of things we have to bring back.
Yeah, exactly.
And I always tell people, crowdfunding started with the women in the church. We always had crowdfunding. When something needs to be done, they raise money to get it done. So we've always had it.
All of these organizations, women are at the center. It's so pivotal and central to the development, the continuance, and much else.
I'm glad you're doing this because it's so many stories and so much history.
And it's important to do these oral histories. I think it's pivotal. It's something that's been knocking around in my mind. I put New Millennium Oral History together, New Millennium Oral History Archives together many years ago, but got involved in producing so many local, community, regional theater as an executive producer, also acting, and as a person in charge of institutional advancement, which is pretty cool. And I just gotten so involved with that. But
You're taping now?
so many people have made their transitions too. So we missed out on talking to them. So that's why now we're just determined, we're setting aside that time. And the stories are vital because, academic history written by historians and other academics. But we also have this more to supplement that.
Exactly.
And also bring up the rear, as it were, being told. So what I was saying before is, of course, the men are involved, and their stories are often told. But if you look at the thing such as the Great March of Washington, August 28th, 1963, colonial speaking,
Exactly. Exactly. And I think another thing too is I have this conversation with people a lot, and I really discovered it doing the research and documenting people. I document men, women, all of them. But one of the things I found out, a lot of the problem comes from mainstream media that will only focus on one person. And we know that it's never one person.
It's never.
And I think that, you can hear me?
No, it's, pardon me. Yeah, no, you're fine. I'm not. You're
and I think that's part of the problem, because when I did the Wikipedia article on Florence Grace, I ran into a woman that documented her in her book. I was running into all these books with Mrs. Rice's name in. And she kept saying, where are you reading all this? And one of the women who wrote about her lived in New York City. And I contacted her. She sent me pages of stuff. And what she said is similar to what this other female historian said, that we have to consider and change the narrative a little bit. The women are there, we have to find them.
Right.
And I told a young woman, women didn't have the luxury to sit around and do nothing.
No, they were always doing something.
So we have to tell, they have this illusion that they weren't doing anything.
No, they were always.
They had to.
Yeah, they were
Exactly.
It's just that they form now it's a bit of a shadow history.
Exactly. It's not documented.
Yeah, it has to be documented.
You have to find them. You have to search for them.
Absolutely.
And I don't know, in fact, Mrs. Rice told me about Gerda Lerner. Now, she was a woman and that was sort of like her theory. They are there. You just have to find them.
Absolutely. That goes with so much.
You have to find them. We constantly have to find people.
Yes.
And
bring them to the fore and shed a light on
Exactly.
or forgotten areas within the historical memory. So anyway, back to account of what you were involved with. And so you were an activist or involved in like
I involved in activist activity, but I don't call myself an activist. I just,
There's nothing wrong with
and then
myself.
also you gotta understand, growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area, there was always a movement, and you would just find it in the
Of course, whether you go back to the beginning, early 50s, mid 50s, the B, you just start with that, post World War II, you go into the Salvio, who was a university
I remember
student,
Mario
and the
Savio.
free speech movement,
Exactly.
just on and on and on and on.
And part of the reason why I left the West Coast, the movements died. It's like God, it was always a front, it was always a movement, it was always something you could hang on to, and then it sort of like just disappeared. So, and then I had in-laws on the East Coast, and we used to always visit.
So when you were born in that Northern California area, and you were there up until your 20s or your 30s,
What?
living there.
Yeah, I think I moved out of California. I moved out.
First time you left California was
I was
in
in
your
my
late
20s.
20s, or your 20s.
Right. But I used to always go back and forth.
Go back and forth.
So I saw a lot about New York because I had in-laws. And even when I was going to college in the late 70s, I would come to New York. I mean, we would drive across country. Because, I don't know, young people don't do what young people used to do when I was growing up. And it was like a rite of passage to go up across the country.
How did you find New York when you were coming from relatively sunny California? Northern California is still sunny.
Well, when we used to visit a relative, I had relatives that lived on 110th Street.
105.
110th Street, right? And it was like a relic. I mean, they were very classy, they were very Harlem. I used to love looking at the pictures. And they had been married for over 60, 70 years. And just to be sitting there, listening to their stories.
And you stayed with them?
No, we would visit them. And then I had other relatives that lived in Brooklyn. So I got to see Manhattan and Brooklyn. I got to see Harlem.
So, but you settled down here.
Oh, yeah. When I first came to New York, I lived in Harlem. I lived in Harlem for a while. And
If
then
you don't mind, perhaps you could just say where I'd like people to know.
It was
so in the village of
about-
Harlem, where were you?
it was about around 113, 114 feet, if I remember correctly. And the area was
Between
really-
Lennox and 7th, or?
maybe closer to 8th. I used to have it remembered, but it's
What
lost.
is now Frederick Douglass Boulevard. So you were there, what, early 70s, mid 70s?
75, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was pretty burnt out at that
It
time.
was a tough time.
And
Heavy importation of heroin.
oh,
And
it
other
was rough.
psychotropics.
But I had some pretty good jobs, and the building we stayed in, it was a nice couple. They ran the store. They were rehabilitating the property. They were going into real estate, and I found out about them through the newspaper. So.
In that area around that time, I remember as a child, there were a lot of shooting galleries. Shooting galleries were abandoned buildings, apartments, maybe apartments or not. People would go up there, shoot up.
And the marijuana was heavy too.
Which one?
I can remember there was a whole block, 2 blocks long, where people went to buy marijuana and smoke.
Including
Like it was, yeah.
one of the people copying or buying, and he got roughed up for some reason with President Kennedy's nephew.
Yeah, I remember that story. And I remember where that building was, yeah.
It was West 115 and West 116.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I think David Kennedy used to
Right.
and other people buy heroin. They were buying drugs.
I didn't really see any of that, but I would just see people falling out and stumbling all on the streets. Now, then you had the marijuana crowd.
I just saw people falling out and nodding. They were nodding out, as you know, from prolonged. They were nodding out
Me or him?
to me.
Okay.
They were nodding out from prolonged heroin use. So there was devastation.
It was very devastating.
Lost a lot of good people, to that addiction. It was a very not just heroin, but other psychotropic.
Right.
So you were there mid-70s, late 70s or so?
No, I moved out of Harlem and I moved to East 95th Street.
East 95th
5th Street.
That was the famed dividing line. I guess this pauses for more.
And you know, it's really weird how I moved from Harlem to the Upper East Side. I was just on a bus, and I remember learning in high school, if you want to get cheap rent, you find the marbles.
Well, what I was saying is that 96th Street was that dividing line.
It was definitely dividing.
Black and white, and you got off.
Exactly.
Middle class.
Exactly.
By 96 really on pretty much in all sections except for the ones who were on.
Exactly.
You know, they would stay on. They would switch off to the.
Exactly.
But 96 is that.
It was the.
Traditionally known unspoken, unspoken.
Right.
Margin line.
And everybody used to ask, how did you get over there? I just got off a bus. And I think maybe with some young kids on bikes, some young Irish kids, and I was just
You were what, 96 off Lexington off 3rd
between 2nd and 3rd.
Okay. Right. So you were
I was there for like 7 years in that area. It had rent stabilized for years.
so the rent stabilized in the area, and also a Metropolitan Hospital. So
Yes.
hospital.
Yeah,
there's a lot of
Metropolitan
mental
Hospital was on
health
about
challenges.
103rd.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
Well, there was one in 1960.
Right, but we were further down. That was closer to Madison. We were closer between 2nd and 3rd.
So by the time you came here, you had finished college already.
Right.
And you were working in what?
I worked for a queuing company, a television queuing company for 7 years.
Television.
Queuing company.
What's a television?
Telephone.
What's a telephone? There was digital telephone.
You know, it's really weird. I got the job from an ad in the Village Voice that were looking for a typist.
Village Voice, for those who may not know, is a legendary alternative paper that ran for about 58 years or so in New York. It just met its demise just about
So
4
it's this
years
little
ago.
ad for a typist.
Weekly came out on Wednesdays.
Exactly. That's how I got my
So you
job.
saw, of course, that legendary unemployment section.
Right.
It's the back page.
A little ad for someone for a typist. And I applied for it, and I was there for 7 years. Television industry is very intense. We did 60 Minutes. We did CBS and ABC, World News
So
Tonight.
you set up the teleprompter for all those stations.
I had to type the script. And then when they didn't send you out in the field, you typed soap opera scripts in the office. So they would send you out to do shows. So we would do World News Tonight with Eric Reasoner. And I remember
Harry Reason and Aaron Severide.
Right.
Same station?
Well, Eric Severide, I think
Is that NBC?
no.
Walter Cronkite was on Channel
Walter,
2.
yeah,
CBS.
Walter Cron, and then he went to ABC. So I remember all of them.
So
Dan
you were doing
Rather,
that work
all of them.
before, that was pre-word processor.
Right, it was, yeah.
Of course.
Exactly, it was pretty right.
Computers we
You should
don't
have
have.
seen the typewriters that you typed the scripts with. And then they have to put it in rolls and then put it on the machine. And you know the deal, they look like they're actually reading. And then it got more modern where it's always like in 3 places where they could read
So you worked there for 7 years.
for 7 years in television.
Right. So in television you were working. So I was thinking for a teleprompter. In television.
Right.
So were you working out of the 67th Street ABC office?
57th Street.
Well,
No, but
57th
our
was
office.
CBS.
No, our office was on 60th Street.
Okay.
But a lot of the work you had to go out in the field.
That's 57th Street all the way to West Side.
Right, yeah, they would send you to CBS.
That was the studio.
Right, we used to do all the telethons and That was when the unions were very, very, very strong.
So you remember the union?
IASTE.
AF.
IASTE.
Right, that's the other one.
Right. The same one the cameraman in it.
Wow, that's a strong union. Great jobs.
Oh, that was when you could work. I loved it. My paycheck was never the same. You could always say nighttime differential, short turnaround.
Did you have, like you said, got overtime?
Oh my God. It was every time there was a catastrophe.
So the overtime was a boom.
Whenever something happened, we had to work overtime.
So tell us about the work that you've done with Ghana and the centers on the environment in Ghana, West Africa, and you mentioned Ghana and
Police.
Police in Central America, the only official, the only place where English is the official language in Central America.
Well, I did study ecology when I was in college in the 70s.
So when did the Ghana involvement start?
I got involved with it in about 2006.
2006.
And I got involved in police in 2000, from 2000 to 2014.
So you spent time in Ghana.
I've been there twice, yeah.
And then in police in Central America?
I used to go there like maybe once a year. I used to go there and there like. And that's, well, police is, well, I did study ecology, environmental studies when I was in college, and I loved it then. And then they would always say, catch these people before they vanish, it was a lot of, I would say, the younger people back in the days that were in the environmental movement, it was doomsday. Like when I hear Elon Musk, it's like you sound like the 70s environmentalists. And then a lot of people got out of the environmental movement and went into the argument because the other was like, I can't live in doomsday. So a lot of people
When you say doomsday, you mean that they speak in a certain apocalyptic.
yeah, it was like, very.
Everything is coming to an end.
Oh, yes. There's a lot of that in
Well, if you
there.
look across the environment, you see this,
And then everything got reversed.
ozone layer collapsing. That was something we were talking about years ago.
And back then, what was really weird, in the 70s, people had a lot of solar houses. We had some neighbors that had a solar house. We used to sit up in a solar house. I just used that had a solar house built.
I remember that. I used to sell some solar power T-shirts.
And then it went away.
For an environmental group when I was at a college. I did it for a number of months. I was a solar power T-shirt. And it was this whole thing about promoting 2 days hence his birthday. It's going to be the 51st anniversary of his birthday. This coming Thursday, 22, which interestingly enough came under the EPA, it's under President Nixon's administration. Birthday became official.
And remember when everybody drove Volkswagen?
People were less concerned completely back then about carbon footprint.
But they
conscious now.
But they reversed it, and it didn't come back to what, the 80s. No, a lot of it didn't come back until almost the late 80s, early 90s, because there was a website in the World Wide Web when it was first coming about, and it had a whole list of all these solar companies that went defunct in the late 70s and early 80s.
And then we got, we reversed ourselves and fallen behind. And then recently, within 4 years of the Trump administration, they rolled back an enormous amount of regulations concerning the environment. So there's an enormous amount of work that has to be done. And as I said, today is 2 days from today, 22nd of April. So we have a few minutes and then we'll take a little break. Pause there in the back. We're talking to Linda Fletcher. Before we get to Belize and Central America, perhaps you can talk to us about your time in Ghana and what kind of work you do.
Well, the work in Ghana came after Belize. Okay, I got involved with the Ghana Quanta Project.
The Ghana?
The Quanta project. Nukwanta.
The Ghana Quanta Project.
Ghana Nukwanta project. And I met Elder Aduli, and she was really, really active. And she was doing work in Ghana. And I was happy to find people in the city that were doing environmental work. Because I was doing work with police for 14 years.
So the Belize, the work, the environmental and ecological work in Belize predates Ghana.
Exactly.
So when did we should start with the Belize. When did the Belize work start in the country?
It started in 2000.
In 2000. How did that start?
It started because me and a friend were looking for a place to vacation, to take a trip. And we were looking for a place where the environment was pretty much still intact.
Pristine. Yeah.
And
Belize has wonderful.
oh my God, we started going there twice, and it had like 60% of the natural environment was still intact. And I did some
How much percentage?
about 60, maybe more.
60.
Yeah.
It's 60% of the yeah. I wonder, yeah. It's
You've
interesting.
been there?
No, never. I was born in Central America, born in Panama.
Oh, you need to go there. And so we did a lot of reading, and I said, it looks like this is the place. Plane fare was affordable. And then what's amazing, I found out about a grassroots environmental program that was run by Black people of African descent in Belize.
But I mean, Belize is the only country in Central America that's almost completely people of African descent.
Exactly.
It's run by people of African descent.
And about a week before we were about to go to Belize, I'm at a party, Midtown, with John asked me, remember all these traditional parties we used to have every year, you know?
Which parties?
Did you know John asked me, we used to do parties a lot. And just like about a week or two before we were supposed to go to Belize, he knows the person that I had read about in the book. Could you imagine?
So he was able to.
And it's like, wow. Then I go there, and I ended up working there for 14 years. But it was great because I got back into environmental studies again that I hadn't been in since my college days. So they brought me back into it.
Oh, right, but what work were you doing specifically? I mean, Belize is a country of what, about 300,000, 400,000 people?
Well, I was helping them with their outreach, doing websites, whenever there was a
So you were
hurricane.
helping the organization
Right.
as a kind of facilitating.
Well, what they did, the organization had a tree growth program, where they were replanting mahogany trees and trees to out. So I learned a lot from working with them about grassroots environmental program, and I would stay in touch with them like every week. Whenever there was a hurricane or something, they would contact me, contact all these organizations. They need some aid, and they need it quickly, and they were trying to tell the world then that they were dealing with serious environmental issues, and every year it was getting worse and worse and worse. So, and then that was before Katrina and all this other disaster that at least was just still doing it first.
Very interesting to me. And then that work, from doing that work, you got connected with
Doing work in Ghana.
the work in Ghana and West Africa. And was it this
Similar. It wasn't as when I first
the administrative stuff.
when I first started with the Ghana Quanta project, they weren't as environmentally involved as I had been.
Right.
So what I did was I researched and found the Permaculture Institute in Ghana, and I partnered with them. And then Elder Dewey, she was in school, and she was a Queen Mother in another part of Ghana.
Who was she in school by?
I can't
And the
remember.
school ceremonies, I've been to one, Dr. Jeffers, in which somebody's created an elder
Yeah, she was in school,
kind of figure of respect.
and she was given
You
land.
sit on the chair and the whole ceremony and things.
Right.
That's what did school in West
Exactly.
Africa.
So I worked with her. I learned a lot from her. she knew a lot of African history. She knew Liberia back and forth. I never go to Liberia. She passed away. In fact, we had to take her body back to Ghana to be buried. So we had, we had a.
Was that necessary because she was installed in?
Well, we knew as members of our organization that we could not bury her here. We knew that.
She had to be taken back to motherland, Africa.
So it got to be like, we felt like we were fighting over a body.
Yeah. When
We had to organize everything. Oh my God. It was
to do.
It was too much. In our organization, it was about like 6 or 7 of us, and we had to do all this work. And then we took it to the community. And dealing with the community of Harlem sometimes it's like a wrestling match. And nobody ever wins. Huh?
All these factions.
Oh my God. All we do is Elder Dooley telling us, don't bury me.
Don't bury me. Don't bury me here. Take me back.
That's all we do. We had to push whatever was in our way out of the way.
Let's also talk to you about what some of the. I mean, that's a great opportunity you had as an African American being involved in having a deep interest in environment and ecology, and of course we come from an activist that we're just a family that's been engaged in a number of the issues of the day.
The issues of
Yes.
the day.
Let's put it that way. From the 30s, 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, and that tradition continued. With your generation, are you, with your, out of your siblings, you're probably the most active, right? Engaged and assisting organizations and community.
Yeah, we assisted the Panthers. We go all the way back there.
But I mean, are you out of your family now?
The only really political people in my family was me and my mother. It didn't get into the other siblings.
So the remaining members were largely apolitical.
They were very apolitical. It was just
Same thing in my family.
It was me and my mother. Was it you and your mother?
Well, no, it's just me. It's just me. My family, I would say it's safe to say my family is largely apolitical.
Yeah, mine, yeah.
I mean, they vote, concerns for, trade union issues and labor issues and public welfare of everybody and so on. They're active in that, but not really, just the generation. I was raised by grandparents. They were mostly concerned with spiritual matters. I mean, I'm a churchman, involved in church my whole life. But yeah, not people. I think apoliticalism. It's a very dangerous thing to be disengaged.
I think so too.
Yeah,
and then growing up in Berkeley was all in the environment. How could I not? My parents couldn't keep me in the house. There was so much going on outside. It was like, I'm going to miss all that.
People think, for instance, that people grew up in the church, that the church is a vibrant place, and that there's, I'm talking about the Star Black Church, but and that everybody was involved in Dr. King. Everybody was involved, and a lot of those churches were very conservative, socially conservative, and disengaged.
Exactly.
And to say,
oh, and I forgot to tell you, before I went to college, I was living in King Ashbury at that time. So I saw the beginning of that movement. And I knew people that were dead in front of that movement. So I saw the Diggers. I saw so much go down in such a short period of time. Oh my God. And we lived right on, we lived about
coming out of Berkeley.
So I saw the free speech movement in high school. And then everything was going on across. So then we fought the Vietnam War in college. That went on for years.
Feminism, all these,
I would say I was a Shirley Chisholm alternate delegate in the 70s, coming out of California.
You went to the convention in 1972 for the first
In Florida.
Black program for
Right. And
she was from Brooklyn
Right, and what I saw, what I would say, what I saw in the early days of those movements is not how the narrative is now. Back then, women were focusing on the negativity within their own group as women. That was a big deal. And being a Shirley Chisholm alternate delegate, being a Shirley Chisholm alternate, and coming out of California, I'll never forget the New York caucuses.
Well, but with the Shirley Chisholm campaign, you were working for the West Coast, or you were here?
I was selected. I was living on the West Coast. I was selected as a delegate to California, right, alternate delegate.
To go to the 72.
To Miami. I was in Miami. And we met with her every morning. She was fantastic. I mean, to meet with her every
Brooklyn by way of Barbados.
and she was just, I mean, there was no wasted words, no wasted moves, no wasted strategy. Everything was precise and warm and there, you know. And we would meet every morning with her. And then from there, you went to the different caucuses. I went to the Black Caucus, the Youth Caucus, the Women Caucus in the morning.
To be able to go to the 72 Democratic Convention.
Yeah. I was in Miami. And I did the Poor People's Campaign before I went to college.
So the Poor People's Campaign, after Martin died, they actually did.
Right. So that was even way before any of that.
That was around.
That was around 67, 68.
Or when Martin died, they were planning to do it.
Right.
He was assassinated.
Right. Right.
40 or 68. So
We worked on the Poor People's Campaign.
And the march with these.
But I may have just been 20 years old. I tell people today, yeah, I went all the way. We were the organizers in San Francisco. That was right before I went to college. That was after the Haight-Ashbury experience.
The Haight-Ashbury was 67.
Right, that was 67. So right. Like I was telling you earlier, there was always movement in California.
No movement everywhere.
And you just got to know, you know. But I think the movements were.
over here.
I think the movements were more honest. They were sincere. That was some amazing organizing. I can't remember the exact number of buses, but we took buses that went from California.
So I'm going to just try to catalog. So Haight-Ashbury 67 or thereabouts, then 68, two more. It was going on everywhere.
Right.
Canvases.
Right.
The through line.
Right.
As a teen, as a young adult.
15.
20-something.
I was seeing the movement at 15, 16 in Berkeley.
Did your family worry or discourage you to be engaged? I'm going to ask that question again.
Well, my mother was
He hears you clearly.
Well,
So I'm going to repeat the question again. So I was asking Linda Fletcher, were her parents, I keep getting these signals that I shouldn't speak about, but were your parents encouraging you? Were they supportive, or did they try to dissuade you from an active involvement?
What I would say, my parents were divorced at that point, and my mother was doing her own political work, and my political activities were pretty much my business.
And as you said earlier, your mother.
Yeah, she was actually.
She was aligned with much of what that kind of.
Yeah, because it was when we were in high school, there were major fights in the Bay Area for black people to even be cashiers or work in a hotel. Those were out and out fights in the streets. I mean, it was brutal.
Because when people think of that Bay Area, they think of it as this wild and swinging liberal democracy.
Oh, no.
It was, but there were conservative forces that also
Very
tried to afford it.
right.
You know.
In fact, my mother, when I was documenting the migration from my own history, from my own family history, I was shocked, and I had even asked my mother some questions, how short that period was, that they even opened up the jobs. Here they recruited all the people from the South to come and get some jobs, then when they moved from the South to the West Coast to get the jobs, and they had to fight to get the jobs. And then the jobs only lasted 4 to 5 months because the war effort was over. And then my mother said they even wanted them to go back to where they came
That's
from.
right.
So my family had, that generation had to fight to stay in California.
Well, you know, you and I talked about this. We talked about this off camera, and we talked about it episodically. The task, the fight for progress, so that vaster amounts of people can benefit from the fruits and the harvest of this country, particularly the brown world, and also even some poor whites, and then other. It's an unending struggle. It's a Sisyphean task. You know, to use Greek mythology as a sort of metaphor. It's, you know, you roll that rock up, you have a roll back.
Exactly.
So it's an unending and unsleeping struggle for inclusion and for
Exactly.
you know.
Exactly, and that's why I say it's very important that people study their history through their lineage. If you're going to do genealogy, the timeline is just as important as the names. And actually, the community I grew up with, I didn't know it until I was working on the Wikipedia article, that it was actually named after a man that brought the shipping industry to Richmond to make the shipping World War II. And I said, wow. And there was no article on him. At some point in time, I need to do that, but I've documented other things in that area. So I've connected myself historically. I mean, I've done genealogy, so
We're going to get to that.
I have positioned myself in why I'm here, how I got here.
We're going to get to that.
Okay.
The work that you're doing around the Wikipedia. So you're not a grant writer. You're giving people information.
Right.
So in the police, the Ghana Nexus connection, that was really, you know, rewarding and fulfilling.
Right. I'm still doing,
And of course it continues.
It continues. And
You try to do it and you feel that it's making a difference in the impact.
Oh, in fact, in Ghana, we were able to get someone to sponsor the permaculture network for 4 years and help them to build. They have a tree growing program, right? And it expanded by 14%. From the person that we got someone that I don't want to give names, but someone that lives here, a black doctor who supported that project that I was with for like 4 or 5 years. And he always says, you know, when you're dealing with the continent, you have to always, don't be a romanticist. You got to be practical, find people to trust.
We talked about that too, about like we're looking at Locke's graph, as you say, just talking about the African romanticism.
Even the romanticism is negative.
It means people to come there and tell them
Practical.
the issues and struggles and
So it transformed. The worst part about it was life is funny. When we went to Ghana in 2012, I joined the Ghana Funding Project in 2006. And that's another part of Ghana where the property is. But I partnered with the Permaculture Institute, and people in Starbucks, everybody put their little pennies together, and we paid for the people in the Ghana Funding Project to come to Techiman to learn sustainable agriculture. So we raised like $500. right out of everybody's pocket. Everybody's putting money on it. And so we had, and what's amazing here, we think the seniors individuals, and I have to tell people, you can't send one woman from one part of Ghana to go this way for 8 hours and that way for 8 hours. They don't function like that as individuals. We have to raise money
Time.
different realities, right?
Exactly.
Have a different reality. So we were able to get that done. They learned. I actually did a website on that. They learned a lot. And when we went to Ghana in 2012, right? We visited the women that we paid for them to go take the training. And I remember one of them, their husband said, "Oh my God, they came back moringa crazy." He's talking about the women that came back moringa crazy.
That's a long, that's, I've been involved with people like this project for plus 2 decades, over 2 decades.
And what's so weird when I see young people that are just getting involved in stuff, they act like nothing happened before them. It's like, we're just waiting for you guys.
Wait for them to come along. Meantime, things are...
And then when we were there in 2012, we went to both parts. We went to 3 parts of Ghana. Because we had a friend at the Ghana Country Project, because a lot of our members, a few of our members had homes built in Accra, in the suburbs. So we were stationed there, and then we would go to...
So the base was Accra, the capital of Ghana.
Right.
That's your base.
So we went to the Quanta, which is way on this side, and then on the west side we went to Techimon, because we wanted to see the permaculture institution. Techimon.
Oh, Ketchum.
Tech. No,
Ethiopia. That's a tract of land that was given to me and Rasta.
Right. So we went to Techimon.
But I want to get that Cheshire Mud is in East Africa.
Right.
In Ethiopia. Tract of land was given to the Rastafari.
Exactly.
By the Emperor Haile Selassie. I think 60. But we're coming to a close, and I wanted you to talk about going forward. What marginalized folk, given states, communities that are under stress, under served, and we're not getting some of the living or having an opportunity to have this, not this dream/nightmare, but rather communities that are marginalized. What going forward needs to be done? I mean, I've lived in North Harlem, I've lived in other places in New York. You've seen and know from other communities on the West Coast, in California, and for elsewhere. What are some of the big challenges that you're facing these communities?
I think.
Because if not racism, there's, ecological disaster, a lot of the, terminals, bus depots, and so on. These things can be other dubious environmental
I think it's awful. I can remember when the homeless issue first was in San Francisco, about 25 years ago. Nowhere in a million years would I would think this is a whole country. I think everybody needs, I don't know, we have all these representatives and we still have these homeless issues, the opioid issues, and I think that people are going to have to fight about it. We should not have a country with this much homelessness, this much drug addiction. Where is it coming from? Where is the problem? They might, the education system needs to be a lot better.
We know the roots of it. A lot of it is people being pushed out of affordable housing, gallop this or gallop that problem, shelters. And it's a result of,
I think it's got to be a priority. I don't want to badmouth Vice President. It's like you're bragging about what you did in California. No politician should be bragging about anything.
You're talking about Vice President Kamala.
Right. I don't think any of our elected officials should be bragging about anything. We've got an opioid crisis, and it's embarrassing when you see everywhere you turn, it's homeless issues. This has been going on for the last 2-3 decades.
You got a huge problem with shelterlessness. Then you have,
And then, like you said, it's hopelessness. So how do we deal with hopelessness? How do they get to hopelessness? Where is the lifelong motivation to keep a person from becoming homeless? How does culture create that? So it's obviously, from what you're telling me, there's something wrong with this culture for hopelessness to even set in the first place.
so do you think it should be, there clearly should be a lot more community-based organizations?
I'm so glad you said
And
that.
the church is pivotal. And since it's pivotal, they need to really step up.
Yeah.
And they've dropped the part of the particular power. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just beautiful and I noticed at the time we had left. So everybody needs to be all hands on deck
And all feet on the ground.
that's right. All these, whatever. So why do you have that many organizations left and so on? Then use what we have, right? And say we have all of these houses of worship. They should be engaged in impact the people.
Exactly. I'm glad you said that because someone I took a commentary on Facebook just yesterday, and I thanked her for the work she did organizing the drumming circle, art exhibit, and that was one of the beauties of the Harlem community, of the Brooklyn community. I want to see more community people initiating stuff, not stuff that's sponsored from the outside.
Not top down. Just
No,
right
and
there.
you know what's really weird? I was thinking this morning, I said, all the events I remember, it came from people on the ground. You remember those events?
I grew up in Brooklyn, I can tell you, there was so many
Initiative. People want to do this and people want to do that. Like we used to do and even I stopped doing a lot of stuff. We just get tired. I remember we used to.
And what it is, we want to get comfortable. We're doing a lot, and other people need to assist in doing that. And we need to pool our energies together and bring on new people
Right.
and grow. Not just 1 or 2 or
Right.
50 people doing it. It's insane. And that's what's left with that's what ails a lot of these organizations.
And we used to bring, when the UN conferences used to come to New York, we're talking about maybe 10, 20, when we started doing that, 2010, right? We used to bring them to the Harlem Community Garden.
And speaking of which, we have these wonderful community gardens in every garden. It's really incredible development to see take shape in a number of parts.
Right.
Just before Harlem has about 20 out. Unhappily, we've come to the end. Talking to the wonderful Linda Fletcher, who's given up her time to so many organizations and also individuals that she's assisted in moving their lives. And I'll leave it what I said, their careers forward. And we thank her for taking the time out on a beautiful Tuesday afternoon. Belated happy birthday to you,
Thank
which was
you.
yesterday, 19 April 2021. And for New Millennium Oral History Archives in the city of New York, and I'm going to start saying in the world, we thank you for watching our video.